great address and taking us into so many different arenas. I think when I look at the performance, I'm stunned for what's happened over these 20 years. And I look at the transition that's just occurring as you've handed the baton to Lawrence Wong, whom I'm proud to say is another former Mason Fellow and distinguished graduate of the Kennedy School. And so far, so good. But he performed very well in the previous jobs that he had an opportunity to either perform in or not so well. And on the basis of his record, we're able to make a transition. So if we imagine, so Dean Weinstein is now having a strategic review here of the school as we think about our next stages in the future. And if you were offering a thought or two about how we would train next generations of leaders who were trying to produce a track record somewhat more like your own. Improvement in citizens' lives, improvement in citizens' incomes, improvement in citizens' safety, improvement in citizens' health, improvements in citizens' feeling about whether the society is going in the right direction or the wrong direction, cohesion, otherwise. So again, this would be a textbook. Maybe you'll write this textbook as your next assignment, but give us some of the headlines.
Well, first, focus on what you have been very good at doing, which is to understand, analyze policy options, policy implications, and ideas to do things better. How can government run better? I think you put a lot of emphasis on that. And I have found what I learned in the Kennedy School in those areas very valuable to me. I think beyond that, it would be very useful to have an understanding of how organizations work, how you can fit into a big organization, and how you can actually translate idealism and energy and ideas into actions and results. Lots of young people start off idealistically. They want to change the world. They think that things can be done better, and they are right. But when you go into an organization and you find that it's big and stodgy, and a lot of people are older than you, and a lot of people say they know more about it than you, and a lot of people have other thoughts and priorities than you, how are you going to fit in and be the change, as the slogan has it? It's quite hard. You need some patience, wisdom. Gray hair helps some, but too much gray hair is not, can be a problem. But to understand how such organizations can be made to work, I think is very useful. The governments often have many such organizations, in every government. I think thirdly, to understand the international environment, because, the Kennedy School is not a school of foreign policy, but every country operates in an international environment, including the United States of America. And you need to know what the tensions are, what the interests are, what are transient, and you hope that will blow over with another administration or another foreign leader. What are long-term trends which have to be seriously dealt with and may need change of mindsets which are quite fundamental. And I think if you're going to go into government, that's another area which is important. The last area, which maybe is capstone, is you need to understand some politics. How do you get into a position where you are able to make things happen in the country? If the political leadership goes wrong, if you have a good civil service, it can keep going okay for quite a long time to come. If you never have had a good political leadership and you have a strong civil service, you can go okay as long as it's straight and level and you don't fly into a crisis. If you're in a crisis and you must switch off the autopilot and take hold of the controls, you have a problem. So actually, our model is that the political leadership has to understand what it is to govern. It's not just for you to make speeches. It's not just for you to be the PR face. It's not just for you to read the script which you have been drafted, write it, decide the content, set the direction, and make it happen. And how to get into such a political situation may or may not be possible in every country, but to understand how politics works and therefore how within that environment public officers can make a contribution, I think is important. Probably the most important of all.
Let me stay with that topic for a second, because I know that both you and your father before you were always a little reluctant to, quote, offer lessons or clues from Singapore. And you have often said this is a continuous journey in which you earn your keep every day and you are grateful for what's been accomplished, but you don't take anything for granted and you don't think anything is permanently accomplished. But still, if I remember when Nazarbayev became president of Kazakhstan, and for whatever reason, he asked me some thoughts about Kazakhstan. And I said, I would go try to talk to Lee Kuan Yew, your father.
Which he
when
did.
he was prime minister, which he ultimately did. And I would go study what happened there. In the case of Rwanda, I had a similar opportunity to have a conversation with Kagame early on when he began. I said I would go talk to Singapore and see what happened in Singapore. So let's imagine, part of the fun that I did with this report card was an article last summer imagining that rather than just the two choices Americans had between the Republican and the Democrat, maybe we had a third choice, that we would subcontract the government to you for 4 years. Or maybe the British, as they go through their revolving door, say, well, why don't we see if we can get the senior minister to spend 4 years, running Britain and see how that works out. So if you were to go to Nicaragua or Guatemala or Tanzania or somewhere, tell us, is there enough transference or enough possibility of adapting the lessons if one of our students goes back home to whichever country they've come from and decides, okay, we're going to make wherever as successful as Singapore?
Well, I think you can imagine that at different levels. If you want to, for example, if you want to design a pension system, we have one which is funded, which is solvent, which meets a range of needs: retirement, housing, healthcare, provides for longevity risks, and it doesn't sing and dance, but it meets the needs of 80% or more of our population. And then we have other schemes to top up for the rest. And if you want to design a pension system, well, you can look at ours and you can imagine how pieces of that can apply in your system. If you want to design a healthcare system, we have one. It's not fully government operated. There's a private hospital sector. The government part isn't operated as a department. There are hospitals which are non-profit but have to break even. There's choice, but at the same time, we nudge you in certain directions and set certain public expectations and norms. And we are grappling with issues which you are too, for example, how to keep medical insurance under proper control, which is an insolvable problem. But you can study our experience and see what is doable in your system, I think, or housing, for example. But there are also unique things to Singapore. So that is one of the reasons why we hesitate to say that we have got your solution, because we don't necessarily even have our own solution for all time. So for example, in housing, why were we able to do public housing which covers 90% of the population? Because when we started out, a lot of the land in Singapore was owned by the estates of wealthy people who had died, businessmen, traders from the 19th and early 20th centuries. And they had bought up big chunks of Singapore. In those days, the land was not so expensive. It had become their estates, and it was going to be tied up for so many generations until those lives and being plus 21 years, as the legal term says. And the government says, no, we are going to develop the country. You are going to benefit. It's a windfall. We will take this, the country will benefit. We acquired the land, the government acquired large chunks of land from the estates. The dispossessed were not the poor. And therefore, because we had the land, we could plan, we could clear, we could build. And therefore, we could house the population. And you can't easily do that. I mean, in South Africa, for example, are you able to expropriate the whites? It is a completely different political situation. So you may or may not be able to do exactly what we have done, but this is how we have made our public housing work, and we hope that you will learn something from it. The politics level, I do not know that it is transferable. As I tried to explain, it has worked like this in Singapore because of the path we took. Because we'd gone through this fire and this crucible of fire. And that generation understood that our backs are to the wall, we will make this work. But more than that, there was one happenstance. After we became independent, the opposition, which was a left-wing opposition, decided that they would declare this a sham independence and they would boycott Parliament. And therefore, they vacated the seats, the PAP expanded, filled the whole space of politics, and therefore established dominance, which it has been able to keep and make use of to good purpose now for more than half a century. And I don't know that we will, if you start on a nation-building process, you'll have the good fortune to have such an outcome from big struggles, or to have an opponent which will make such a mistake.
Okay, well, I think the path dependency you and Zekhauser and I were talking about last night, and I think that's a big lesson, so that there's not an easy transference with respect to that domain. Can we take you to COVID? So that for those that are interested, we'll have these slides up somewhere, but the COVID hit the world.
Yes.
So this is like a test for everybody. And Massachusetts is about the size of Singapore, roughly. We got a lot of coastline. But if I look at the number of deaths from COVID between Singapore and Massachusetts, I pointed this out actually to Charlie Baker when he was the governor here. He didn't appreciate this very much. So tell us how Singapore dealt with COVID so much more successfully than Massachusetts.
Well, I don't have a specific comparison with Massachusetts, but I can tell you what we tried to do.
Yeah.
We saw it coming. We knew we couldn't avoid it. Because if you're at the end of the world, like New Zealand, they could close themselves off for quite a long time, and they get on pretty well, and it worked for quite a long time and it tided them over. They had time to get vaccinated and prepare. But we knew it was going to hit us soon, and we couldn't just shut ourselves down. Because we are a global hub, and if you shut yourself down, you constrict the economy. We will starve. So what do? So we watched, we calibrated, we set up a working committee which oversaw the process, and then Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, or rather then Minister Lawrence Wong, was put in charge of the committee and coordinated the ministry. So it's not a Ministry of Health problem, it's a national problem. Trade and industry, MOM, Ministry of Manpower for jobs, health, public health, your ministry responsible for community development because you have to get community activities organized. And we put all this together and oversaw it through a working committee which was multi-ministry, and everybody chipped in. Then we calibrated our response as we went along. Eventually, we had to have quite tight borders, but we tried hard to hold it off. I think in retrospect, we probably held it off a bit too long, and we probably should have been tighter a little bit earlier. But this is after the fact. We expected the bugs to come in, it did. In fact, I was in Davos, going home from Davos when I got the message to say you got the first case. I said, not a surprise. Now let's get people prepared for this. And then we took it as it went on. We watched other people lock down. We said, do we have to lock down? And we watched the numbers. They wiggled up, they wiggled down. We said, as long as I can survive, I will try to hold off the lockdown as long as we can. After 2 months, the numbers started creeping up. Because people were coming home, we were quarantining them, but there were leaks. And in particular, it leaked into the foreign worker dormitories. And that worried us a lot because it's a communal living, and if it spreads in the dormitories, that's one thing. If it then comes out from the dormitories into the population unvaccinated and vulnerable, and many of them aged, that's a big problem. We watch the trends every day, the numbers tick up today. Somebody will tell you, that's because we work extra hard to catch the bugs. Tomorrow the numbers will go down. After 3 days of times 1.5, times 1.5, times 1.5, I said, we don't believe this. You better move. They said, we haven't reached 100 cases a day yet. I said, I'm not waiting. So we closed down. Fortunately, after 2 months, we got the situation in the dorms under the control. We got the situation in the general public, in the population under control. We reopened schools, reopened jobs. We kept safe distancing going for a long time more. And because people trusted us, and we said, please, no visitors or no more than so many in the public eating places, or for some time the public eating places were closed. They generally complied, and it helped to slow the bug down. Meanwhile, we said, let's get ready for vaccinations. It doesn't exist, but the vaccines will come. The first in line will not be me, because the US, the Europeans, those who make it will make sure they are first in line, but I will not be last in the queue. So book the vaccines, book multiple, over-insure. Some may fail, some may work, but be there and make sure you have the access. And we booked the vaccines. I think we started talking about this in April, May 2020. The vaccines became available to everybody's astonishment within a few months. And by the end of the year, we had the first vaccines, and we were starting to vaccinate our population. And fortunately, we queued them. So we said old folks first, vulnerable ones first responders first. Then by age group, take your time. We don't have a crisis because numbers are under control. And first in line was me on television. I had every confidence it was a good vaccine. It worked for me. It worked as a gesture. And people came willingly. There was no fear. We had some anti-vaxxers. Fortunately, we were able to keep their numbers down and have effectively rebut them. And we were able to tide over until enough of our people were vaccinated, so that by the time Omicron came and overwhelmed all efforts to shut down, we were in a stable position and we could open up. The key thing is not that nobody died, because that's impossible, or the economy wasn't affected. That's also impossible. But that we were able to manage it so that you didn't lose your jobs. I had resources to keep your pay going when your employer couldn't pay you. You didn't go to hospital and find no oxygen and no bed. You didn't have to scramble from place to place with a tube looking to top up patient gasping, dying. You didn't have to queue up to be cremated like happens in some places. And we came through minus a trauma for which thanks be to the Lord. So at the end of this, we came out. I think it's a great relief. We wrote a white paper, analyzing what we could have done better, sooner, cheaper, more effectively. We published it, we debated it, preparing for the next pandemic, which one day will come, and we watch every new bug carefully. And we publish it online, so if you're interested, you can find it somewhere on the internet.
is a very good read, and it's also the extent to which your government maintained the confidence of your citizens about the ways in which you explained it and sustained confidence, put you in a much better position for the next round. But we have only about a dozen students eager to ask questions. Let me start with this gentleman. Please introduce yourself briefly and a short question.
Absolutely. Dwight Hutchins, Kennedy School, mid-career from '96. PM Lee, thank you so much. And thank you. My wife and I spent a decade in Singapore. We just left a year ago, so we lived through COVID. And a couple of things struck us. One was that, indeed, all of the ministers that you had across were super competent and super into the details of their ministries and running them like clockwork. So that was really impressive, the depth and the partnership with the American business community. I was the chairman of the American Chamber, and the partnership there that grew FDI. You could feel that the country was united in that sense. But what I saw and what we saw with COVID was you taking the leadership, taking the first jab, being on television every night, explaining to the people what was going on. And the taxi drivers to everyone on the street was listening to your every word. And it was impressive. And I think that you digging deep into saying we're going to protect our elders first and foremost, created a sense of national unity that, you know, as we just went through an election, you know, we questioned. And it was curious, how did your country take, like you said, people from very different cultures and bring them together and make them Singaporean? I mean, when we were there when Lee Kuan Yew died, and someone commented that it must feel like when George Washington died.
Sorry, can you make it shorter?
So what would it be? You know, what did you do?
Good.
What did the country
We
do
got
to
it.
create
We
this
got it.
cohesiveness?
Good.
We spent a long time doing this. Partly is policies. We made sure that lives improved for all, that there's not just a prosperous economy, but jobs which were good jobs for a wide range of the population. We educated people and tried to imbue them with some sense of values and what used to be called civic education, but an understanding of where Singapore fits in with the world. It's partly going through crisis together, and we've been through several in our half century, whether it's oil shocks, whether it's Asian financial crisis, whether it's the global financial crisis more recently, or a decade ago, SARS. Those not in Asia might have forgotten, but SARS was another COVID virus which hit us in 2003. And so there's a foundation of confidence and trust and mutual obligation between the government and the public, which you have to build on in a crisis. You have to be there. When in February 2020, as the cases started to grow, I happened to be having my National Day, my Chinese New Year's Day dinner with community leaders at the government house. And that evening, they were about to listen to me, but they were spreading amongst themselves WhatsApp photos of toilet rolls disappearing from supermarket shelves. There was a panic because people were not sure what was going to happen. Are you going to lock down? What are we going to be short of? Rice, toilet paper, food, everything. So I was about to speak to this. These are the community leaders, our people on the ground who have to help us hold the ground. And I told them, don't worry, we will take care of this. There will be food, there will be supplies. You will not have to eat Army C rations. And tomorrow I'm going to broadcast to the nation and explain to them what's coming to the extent that we know and how we must prepare ourselves. So the next day I made a broadcast. I didn't speak every day, otherwise people will stop listening to me. But I made over 3 years about 20 broadcasts, probably less than that, at critical moments to reassure people that we are there for you, this is what we know, this is what the risks are, this is what we have to do together. And one of the most telling broadcasts was when we locked down, and I had to say, don't worry, you will be safe and we will take care of all of you, including all the workers in the foreign worker dorms. It made a big impact on them. I think it made a big impact on their parents and families back home in India, in Bangladesh, in China, all the places they came from. It was not so obvious that it was going to be deliverable, but it was something which we had to try our best to do, which we did.
Which you did. Yeah. Please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Teresa He, and I'm part of the MPID program, class of 2096. So my question is more about promoting versus regulating innovative industry. For example, Singapore is one of the first country promoting and formulating cryptocurrency
No,
policy.
we are not promoting cryptocurrencies. That is a complete misunderstanding.
Regulating crypto policy and actually invest as a government. So I want to understand more about how do you form policy to make judgment as a country before there's a clear picture or evaluation system of the new industry?
Well, hopefully you are well advised by people who know more about it than you. Hopefully there are examples of how it has worked out elsewhere, and we can see which worked, which didn't, and we can follow them. For example, we did that with cigarette smoking. We scan the world. Every time somebody has a new and draconian measure, we say, how can we level up to them? So, warning messages, horrible photographs, plain packaging. And now people are talking about, well, generational bans, so that beyond a certain age, you will just stop smoking. And we will try and level up to them. Same with social media. But in an unfolding situation, in a crisis like COVID, you can have all the experts' advice, but you are operating in the fog of war. And you have to be prepared to make your own judgment based on incomplete information and contradictory advice. People will say it's safe, people will say it's not safe, people will say it's unproven. I need to do so many more controlled trials. By the time I finish them, the battle is over. So you do have to have an informed judgment and prepared to say, I have heard all this advice, this is what we will do, I'm taking responsibility. And for that, you need people who have seen crisis before and have some sense of what the issues are in your team.
I'm Jay Hong, a senior at the college. As a citizen, I just want to say thank you so much for what you've done for our country, and we're excited to see what you do next. As a young person, I think there's actually, not just in Singapore, but everywhere, there's a larger generational divide based off of different beliefs and normative issues. So I think what my AMA values is very different from what I value. What perspectives do you think young people are lacking nowadays? And how do you think young people can also try and bridge that conversation?
I think you are much more prepared for the new world than we are, because it's a completely different set of challenges, and you are growing up attuned to them. I mean, you do not know a pre-internet age. And the future is going to be connected in one way or the other, despite bifurcation, despite people nearshoring, reshoring, and trying to disconnect chunks of the world. Even in North Korea, people get news, somehow or other. So I think for the new world, the young will be growing up as digital natives, much more prepared for it than my generation can start to be now. We are trying our best not to be swamped and left behind and to keep up, but to be not just keeping up and ahead, you have to be a young person. What you do need to know is that certain things which your parents believe or your grandparents believe are actually true. And remain true. The world has completely changed, but race, language, and religion remain fundamental driving atavistic forces which are very powerful, that there are big countries and small countries, and Singapore is always going to be a small country, that we have different ways of making a living, but we will always have to make a living, and our neighbors will always be bigger neighbors than us, whom we will do our best to make friends with. I once had a visitor from Mongolia, and he said to me that we have a law in our country that you are forbidden to change your geographical neighbors. I said, we have the same law. They've got Russia and China as their best friends. We have Indonesia and Malaysia as our nearest neighbors and good friends. And it is going to be like this for all time. We are different from them. They are different from us. We can benefit from them and they can benefit from us. But there are also differences in perspectives which are quite deep-seated because we're just strategically in a different situation. And we have to be able to manage them. And I think young people particularly have to understand this. It is not so easy. It's not so easy to do and it's not so easy to understand. So every few years, we have a panel on how we can do things better, and somebody will say, why don't we work harder to make friends? And I say, yes, we will continue to work very hard to make friends and continue to work harder. But this is a challenge which is one of those which I talked about, how to get along and hold our own while being able to maintain mutually beneficial relations with others whom we have to live with and who have to live with us. That's internationally. Domestically, I think you also have to understand that some laws cannot be repealed, particularly the laws of economics. Oh, please.
Yeah, Mr. Lee, thank you so much for coming back. And my name is Qi Xuan, the second-year MPA student. This is a question about Taiwan. Hopefully it's not so spicy. Singapore has always been trying to keep peace and facilitate a dialogue between the two sides across the Taiwan Strait, the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China, Taiwan. Do you view the possibility that the PRC using war to reunify with Taiwan will increase in the next Trump presidency, considering he's more flexible in negotiation? If so, how Singapore react trying to keep peace between the two sides from the Taiwan Strait, as she always did in history?
Well, first of all, we have never tried to keep the peace. We have always prayed for peace. It's a big difference. It's beyond our powers. We wish both sides well. We are friends with both sides of the Taiwan Strait, and we hope that they will be able to have a stable, peaceful relationship, and any changes will happen peacefully and in a way which is acceptable to both sides. It has become more complicated over time. I do not know how it will evolve in the next 4 years, but this is a dynamic which has longer than a 4-year horizon, and I don't believe the views which are sometimes expressed to say 2028 or some year like that is crucial, and therefore something is about to happen in the next term of the US government.
Good. Please.
Thank you, Senior Minister Lee, for speaking to us here at Harvard, as well as your leadership of Singapore. We have spoken on multiple occasions on how Singapore is compared to a Garden of Eden. And I noticed I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Benjamin, Singaporean, as well as an MBA student here at Harvard Business School. So you have described Singapore as a Garden of Eden. I was curious as to what strategic steps do you take during your term of government to ensure that we continue in this state, and for looking ahead, for Singaporeans as well as for people looking to live in or partner Singapore, what are some of the things that you would encourage them to focus on to ensure that Singapore continues to grow?
Well, it depends mainly on us. I say Garden of Eden because it's a state where you are in, which once you have left, you cannot come back again. And I try to explain to you why where we are is highly path-dependent and dependent in particular on what happened in the first few years of our nation-building journey. And because we have been able to build on that and maintain that, we have stayed in the Garden of Eden for more than one generation. If you go back to Genesis, that's kind of a contradiction in terms. But in Singapore, we have been in the Garden of Eden beyond Adam and Eve. And the way to stay there is to continue to have good government, continue to have good policies, continue to get new generations of capable and committed people into government to lead the population, and to have the population well looked after, at the same time understanding the realities of what our stability and prosperity depends on, and how we need to work together to keep it like this. Of course, you also have to understand that it is quite unusual for it to be like this. And if you break from this and you go to become a normal country, you will have the problems which normal countries have, and you cannot come back to where you are again, ever. And I've tried to do that. I think over 20 years, pursued all kinds of policies. I've brought in every election new teams of members of parliament, new potential ministers, tried them out. Some have stayed on, some have gone on to other illustrious careers, and kept the team up to date to the best of my ability, and been able to hand over country stable, in good order, to a team ready to take over. And now they have to do it and keep on doing it in the same way. But nothing is forever. Nobody can say, here's a formula and it will work for, never mind eternity, but even for the next 50 years. There's no such formula. But if you ask me, between buying insurance in case you fall out of the Garden of Eden and investing in this so that it continues to work well, I say don't spread your bets. Focus, make sure this works. We've done it before, and if you keep on making it working, all the troubles in the world, well, we can sit here. We won't be immune from them, but I think we can keep ourselves safe from them. And, okay.
Unfortunately, we've come to the witching hour. I apologize for the many other questions that would have been asked. I think the proposition that Singapore has worked miraculously over these decades, and if I look to its future, if it were a stock and you were talking about buying it long or short, it would certainly be long Singapore. I'd say the leadership that's been chosen to take it to the next layer, including Lawrence Wong, whom the senior ministers mentioned, is somebody who's demonstrated also great capacity. So Singapore's been blessed with extraordinary leaders, both as the prime ministers and also in the government at many, many, many levels, and has had a degree of, I think, as you could hear from the senior minister's comments, determination and pragmatism that we could all aspire to. So let me just say we should all join in thanking and welcoming back, and looking forward to welcoming you back many times, one of our most distinguished graduates, Mr. Lee.